Israel, the tiny sandy spot on the map, yet a global giant in influence. You've probably heard of it in the news, maybe you've even read about it in history books. But how well do you actually know the history of this tiny country that has seen so much triumph, turmoil, and transformation? Let's dive into a journey through time, a journey that starts from the biblical days of Moses and King David to the challenges and innovations of modern Israel. Now, when you think of Israel, your mind might jump straight to the Middle East conflicts, or perhaps the biblical stories that have shaped the Western world. And yes, that's part of it, but Israel is more than just a land of ancient prophecies and modern politics. It's a country that's been on the front lines of history, literally and figuratively, for thousands of years. So grab your virtual passport and get ready to travel through 3,000 years of history. From its humble beginnings to its current status as a tech powerhouse, Israel's story is as complex as it is captivating. And don't worry, we're going to keep it fun and lively. After all, a country that's been around this long has a few surprises up its sleeve. Trust me, this isn't your average history lesson. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss the rest of the ride. To understand Israel's modern-day story, we need to wind the clock way back, over 3,000 years ago in fact. Imagine a time before smartphones, before television, before even the wheel. Okay, maybe not that far back, but you get the idea. A time where nomadic tribes roamed the ancient world, seeking land, safety, and identity. And among them, the Israelites were born. It all starts with Abraham. No, not your typical historical figure, but a man with a massive promise to father a nation that would grow to be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Yes, that's where the whole promised land thing begins. And by the way, this land, you guessed it, the land of Canaan, which is modern-day Israel. Now, this wasn't some easy ride. There were no GPS devices to tell them where to go, and no road signs to mark the way. But Abraham's descendants, led by figures like Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, faced challenges, triumphs, and the occasional famine. Thankfully, no Facebook posts about their misfortunes. Eventually, the Israelites found themselves enslaved in Egypt under the rule of a pharaoh who didn't exactly have their best interests at heart. Then enter Moses, stage left, the man who famously parted the Red Sea and led the Israelites to freedom. You've probably seen that scene in movies. It's kind of a big deal. But beyond the special effects, this moment marks the beginning of a whole new chapter for Israel. The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. Yes, 40 years. Just imagine what kind of shopping list they had to make for that trip. But it wasn't all aimless wandering. This time was about forging an identity, one that would later be reflected in the laws given to Moses, the 10 Commandments, which, spoiler alert, would serve as the moral foundation for not just Israel, but many other civilizations. After their desert adventures, the Israelites entered the land of Canaan, setting the stage for the establishment of the Kingdom of Israel. This period would be defined by the rise of the first kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, each one contributing to Israel's growing influence. King David is perhaps the most famous of the bunch. Not only did he unite the tribes of Israel, but he established Jerusalem as the capital, turning it into a spiritual and political center that would resonate throughout history. And then there's Solomon, David's son, who built the first temple in Jerusalem, an act that would shape the future of Judaism and the city itself. This era, though, wasn't without its issues. The kingdom eventually split after Solomon's reign, with Israel in the north and Judah in the south. A little sibling rivalry never hurt anyone, right? Well, maybe it did, because this division set the stage for later conflicts and conquests. All right, fast forward to around 63 BCE. Israel, now known as Judea, has a new landlord, the Roman Empire. And let's be honest, when Rome enters the picture, it's never a quiet affair. The Romans are like that friend who shows up to a party, takes over the playlist, and starts rearranging the furniture. But in this case, they also brought their army. And let's just say, they weren't known for their please and thank you. Under Roman rule, the people of Judea were forced to deal with a mix of Roman political control, heavy taxation, and the occasional rebellion. The region was kinda like the Romans' little trouble spot in the Middle East, and things weren't going to calm down anytime soon. But amidst this turbulent time, something major was happening. And no, it wasn't a gladiator match or a Caesar's feast. It was the rise of Christianity. Enter Jesus of Nazareth. Born into a Jewish family, Jesus was, by all accounts, a pretty revolutionary guy. He challenged traditional teachings, preached love, and emphasized compassion. Now, many people were drawn to his message, but it didn't sit too well with the established authorities, both Roman and Jewish. You know how sometimes a good idea shakes things up and gets everyone talking? Well, Jesus' ideas definitely did that. Fast forward to about 30 CE, and Jesus finds himself on trial, charged with blasphemy, and claiming to be the king of the Jews. The Romans, not keen on any potential troublemakers, decided it was time for an end-of-story moment. Jesus was crucified, a tragic event that would later become the cornerstone of Christian faith. But here's the thing, his death wasn't the end of the story, quite the opposite. His followers, a group of passionate believers, spread his teachings far and wide, establishing what we now know as Christianity. In the years to come, Christianity would grow from a small, persecuted sect into a global religion. And that, my friends, is how you know things are about to get interesting. While the Romans were dominating the region, they also played a significant role in the spread of Christianity. The Roman Empire built roads, which made it easier for early Christian missionaries to travel and spread the message of Jesus. Irony at its finest, right? But as Christianity grew, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. The Romans weren't fans of this new religion at first. In fact, the early Christians faced heavy persecutions. Roman emperors like Nero were not shy about using Christians as scapegoats for various problems, leading to brutal, well-documented persecutions. But Christianity persisted, and in 313 CE, Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, effectively legalizing Christianity. Talk about a plot twist. Fast forward a few centuries. By this time, the region has seen its fair share of conquerors, empires, and shifting borders. The Jewish people, once scattered across the globe after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, were still yearning for a homeland. But the land of Israel was now a prize fought over by a series of powerful empires, starting with the Byzantine Empire and later the Islamic Caliphates. In the 7th century, the Arabs, under the leadership of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, seized control of the region, marking the beginning of Islamic rule over Jerusalem and the surrounding lands. For the next several centuries, the land would see various Islamic dynasties, including the Umayyads and Abbasids, who brought Islam, trade, and culture to the region. Jerusalem became one of the 3 holiest cities in Islam, joining Mecca and Medina as the sites of immense religious significance. But then came the Crusades. In the late 11th century, European Christians embarked on a series of religious wars with the goal of reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim control. And as you might guess, this didn't go down without a fight. Jerusalem changed hands multiple times during the Crusades, and the city became a symbol of Christian and Muslim rivalry. After the Crusades, the region fell under the control of the Mamluks and later the Ottoman Empire, which ruled from 1517 until World War I. Now, the Ottomans weren't exactly known for their hands-off approach, but they also didn't make any major attempts to push the religious groups in the area into conflict. Instead, they allowed a system of shared religious control over Jerusalem, with Jews, Christians, and Muslims all maintaining a presence in the city. For the Jewish people, the Ottoman Empire was, in many ways, a time of relative peace. The Jews were allowed to live in Jerusalem, and small Jewish communities began to form in the city and throughout the region. But still, the dream of a Jewish homeland seemed far out of reach. It wasn't until the 19th century that a new movement, known as Zionism, began to gather momentum, calling for the return of the Jewish people to their ancestral land. The Ottoman Empire, however, was slowly starting to crumble. The early 20th century saw the empire weakening, and with the outbreak of World War I, the region's fate would be determined by forces beyond its borders.
All right, the stage is set, and things are about to get a little more interesting. It's the late 19th century, and the Ottoman Empire, once the region's major player, is on the decline. Enter the Zionist movement, a movement that would lay the groundwork for the creation of the modern state of Israel. Now, the idea of returning to the land of Israel wasn't exactly new. Jewish communities had always had a presence in the region, but the idea of creating a modern Jewish homeland took shape with Theodor Herzl, an Austrian journalist and one of the key founders of Zionism. Herzl's vision was simple: a sovereign Jewish state in Palestine, which he saw as the solution to the centuries of persecution Jews had faced in Europe. You could say he had a pretty clear goal in mind. If you will it, it is no dream, and he meant it. But as with any great idea, it wasn't going to be a smooth road. While the Zionist movement was gaining ground in Europe, the region of Palestine itself was still under Ottoman control. The people living there, a diverse mix of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, many of whom had lived side by side for centuries. So the idea of a large-scale Jewish immigration to the region didn't exactly sit well with everyone. But hey, when has a big dream ever been easy? The real turning point came during World War I. The British, who had an eye on the region, were looking for ways to strengthen their position in the Middle East. In 1917, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issued the Balfour Declaration, stating that Britain supported the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. To put it bluntly, the British were trying to cover their bases. They had the Jewish Zionists in one hand and the Arab allies in the other, and they were hoping to keep everyone happy. Spoiler alert, that didn't work out as planned. After World War I ended, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and the League of Nations handed Britain a mandate to govern Palestine. And just like that, Britain found itself in charge of a region with rising tensions, growing Jewish emigration, and an Arab population that wasn't thrilled with the idea of a Jewish state in their backyard. It's like trying to host a dinner party where half the guests want one dish and the other half is allergic to it. No matter how good your intentions, it's going to get messy. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, tensions grew. The Jewish population in Palestine soared as European Jews fled persecution, particularly with the rise of Nazi Germany. And the Arab population, feeling increasingly threatened by the growing Jewish presence, resisted the idea of a Jewish homeland with increasing hostility. The British, caught in the middle, tried to balance both sides, but as you can imagine, things were starting to fall apart. The situation reached a boiling point in 1936 with the Arab Revolt, which lasted until 1939. Arab resistance to Jewish immigration and British rule became more widespread, and the British, who were stretched thin due to World War II, realized they couldn't maintain control of the situation forever. By the end of World War II, the world's sympathy for the Jewish people was at an all-time high. The Holocaust had left deep scars across Europe, and the need for a Jewish homeland was more urgent than ever. But with the British unable to resolve the tensions, they handed the problem off to the newly formed United Nations, who proposed a solution: partition. Now that the groundwork has been laid and tensions are bubbling over, it's time for the real turning point in Israel's history: the creation of the State of Israel. Buckle up, because this is where the drama really kicks off. It's 1947, and after years of unrest, the United Nations finally steps in and proposes a solution: the partition. The idea was to divide Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem as an international city. On paper, it seemed like a fair solution, but of course, reality is rarely so neat. The Jewish leaders, including David Ben-Gurion, were cautiously optimistic about the partition plan. They saw it as the first legitimate step toward a sovereign Jewish state. But the Arab leaders, not so much. They rejected the plan, arguing that it gave away too much land to the Jewish population, even though they were in the minority at the time. So imagine this: you've just gotten an invitation to the party, but no one wants to share the snacks. Naturally, things get tense. Fast forward to May 14, 1948. David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, stands before a crowd in Tel Aviv and declares the establishment of the State of Israel. It's a monumental moment, the culmination of decades of Zionist efforts. Ben-Gurion's words echo through the history books. The state of Israel is established. It will be a democracy, a place where Jews can live in safety and peace. But as you might expect, the celebration doesn't last long. The very next day, 5 Arab countries, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, declare war on Israel. That's right. Instead of popping champagne, Israel is facing full-scale invasion. It's like being handed a golden ticket to a concert, only to have the entire crowd try to tear it from your hands. No pressure, right? The 1948 Arab-Israeli War, also known as the War of Independence, ensues. The odds were stacked against Israel. The newly formed Jewish state had a population of just 650,000, compared to the combined armies of over 40 million Arabs. But against all odds, Israel holds its ground. With military strategies that often seem straight out of a history textbook and a deeply ingrained determination to survive, the Israelis push back. By the end of the war, Israel not only survives, but it expands its territory beyond the borders outlined by the UN's Partition Plan. But hey, when has a big dream ever been easy? The war had serious consequences. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs were displaced, creating a refugee crisis that still echoes in the region today. The war ended with a series of armistice agreements, but no formal peace. Israel's borders were secured, but the rift between Israelis and Palestinians was far from healed. The creation of Israel was a historic moment of triumph for the Jewish people, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter of conflict, one that would shape the region for decades to come. The question on everyone's mind was clear: could this tiny country, surrounded by enemies, ever find peace?
Now that Israel is officially a state, you think things would calm down a bit, right? Wrong. In fact, the real challenges for Israel are just beginning. The next few decades are marked by wars, uneasy truces, and ongoing efforts, sometimes hopeful, sometimes desperate, to find peace. Spoiler alert, it's a bit of a roller coaster. One of the defining moments in modern Israeli history comes in 1967 with the Six-Day War. It's one of those classic cases where everything goes wrong and right at the same time. Israel, in a preemptive strike, defeats Egypt, Syria, and Jordan in just 6 days. 6 days! The story of Israel's military success is one for the history books. Fast, strategic, and, let's face it, a little bit miraculous. By the end of the war, Israel controls a vast swath of new territory: the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. The world was left in shock. In one fell swoop, Israel had tripled its size. This military victory, however, was double-edged. On one hand, it strengthened Israel's position. On the other hand, it also meant that millions of Palestinians now lived under Israeli military occupation. But Israel wasn't done. The Yom Kippur War, 1973, was just around the corner. This time, Israel was caught by surprise. Egypt and Syria, seeking to reclaim land lost in the Six-Day War, launched a coordinated attack on Israel during the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur. The initial success of the Egyptian and Syrian forces sent Israel scrambling, but once again, Israel regrouped and pushed back, eventually forcing a ceasefire. The Yom Kippur War showed that while Israel was strong, it wasn't invincible. It also highlighted the region's instability and the need for a long-term solution that could offer peace to everyone involved. Fast forward to the late 1970s. After nearly 3 decades of war, something unexpected happens. Egypt and Israel, once bitter enemies, sign a peace treaty. In 1978, U.S. President Jimmy Carter played matchmaker, bringing Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin to Camp David in Maryland. After 13 days of intense negotiations, they hammer out a deal that would lead to the 1979 Camp David Accords. Egypt became the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel, and in return, Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula. It was a historic moment, a beacon of hope that peace was possible, at least between Israel and one of its neighbors.
But here's the thing. Even though Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty, things didn't magically settle down. The conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, as well as with other Arab states, continued. And while Israel and Egypt were no longer at war, the broader issues of Palestinian rights and territorial disputes remained unresolved. In the 1990s, a new hope emerged, the Oslo Accords, a peace agreement brokered between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. This was a big deal. For the first time, both sides agreed to recognize each other and work toward a two-state solution. Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO, and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin met in Oslo, Norway, and signed an agreement that led to the creation of the Palestinian Authority, an interim government in the West Bank and Gaza. But once again, peace proved elusive. A few years after the Oslo Accords, a tragic twist. Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli leader who championed the peace process, was assassinated by a right-wing extremist who opposed the peace efforts. The assassination shocked the world and signaled the deep divisions within Israeli society over how to handle the Palestinian issue. While peace talks have continued sporadically, no lasting resolution has been achieved. Israel and the Palestinians are still at odds over key issues, including the status of Jerusalem, borders, security, and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. And then, of course, there's the question of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, which further complicate the path to peace. The United States has long been Israel's most powerful ally, providing military aid, political support, and, at times, acting as a mediator in peace talks. But the U.S. has also played a controversial role in the peace process, with differing administrations pushing for different outcomes. The question of how much influence the U.S. should exert in the region and the degree to which Israel should be expected to make concessions remains a point of debate.
Fast forward to the 21st century, and Israel's story is anything but quiet. While the ongoing conflict with Palestinians remains a central issue, Israel has become a global player in ways that even its early founders could have never predicted. This small, seemingly besieged country has turned into a technological powerhouse, a hub of innovation, and a key player in global geopolitics. Israel's growth in the field of technology is often described as nothing short of remarkable. The country, with a population of around 9 million people, has earned the nickname Startup Nation due to its vibrant high-tech sector. From cybersecurity to artificial intelligence, medical innovations, and agricultural technologies, Israel is leading the charge in several cutting-edge industries. In fact, Israel has the highest number of startups per capita in the world, and its thriving tech scene has attracted billions of dollars in foreign investment. One of the major factors behind Israel's economic rise is its commitment to education and research. Israel invests heavily in its universities, which are among the best in the world, particularly in fields like engineering, science, and medicine. This culture of innovation has paid off. Israeli companies are at the forefront of fields like water conservation, critical in an arid region like the Middle East, renewable energy, and medical technologies. In 2020, Israeli startups raised a record $10 billion in venture capital. That's no small feat for a country that's barely the size of New Jersey. But Israel's success isn't just limited to tech. Its military industry is one of the most advanced in the world. The country has developed a reputation for military technology, such as the Iron Dome missile defense system, which has been instrumental in protecting Israel from rocket attacks. The combination of technological prowess and military strength has made Israel a key strategic ally of the United States and many other Western countries. While Israel's technological achievements are impressive, the country still faces significant security challenges. The conflict with the Palestinians, particularly the situation in Gaza, remains unresolved, and tensions with surrounding Arab nations have never fully dissipated. The ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict has led to cycles of violence, with occasional flare-ups in Gaza and the West Bank. The situation in Gaza is particularly tense.
Governed by Hamas since 2007, Gaza is under a blockade imposed by Israel, which it argues is necessary for security reasons. But the blockade has led to a dire humanitarian crisis, with millions of people living in poverty and without basic services like electricity and clean water. The humanitarian situation, combined with periodic rocket attacks from Gaza, has fueled animosity and made peace seem ever more elusive. On the broader stage, Israel's relationship with other Arab nations has historically been one of war and distrust. However, in recent years, there has been a surprising shift. The Abraham Accords, brokered by the United States in 2020, saw Israel normalize diplomatic relations with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. These agreements were a huge diplomatic win for Israel and signaled a shift in the Middle East as several Arab nations began to see Israel not as an enemy, but as a valuable partner in addressing shared concerns, such as countering Iran's growing influence in the region. However, these agreements have not been universally accepted in the Arab world. While some countries are warming to the idea of cooperation with Israel, many still reject the idea of normalizing relations without a resolution to the Palestinian issue. This divide remains a significant barrier to lasting peace in the region. Israel's diplomatic position in the world has evolved dramatically over the past several decades. In the early years of its existence, Israel struggled to gain international recognition and was often isolated in international forums. Today, Israel is an important player in global diplomacy. It has strong alliances with Western powers, particularly the United States, and has developed increasingly close ties with countries in Asia, Africa, and even Latin America. In particular, Israel's relationship with the U.S. has been a cornerstone of its security and diplomatic strategy. The U.S. provides Israel with military aid and political support, often using its veto power in the United Nations Security Council to protect Israel from resolutions that are unfavorable to it. The U.S. also plays a key role in the peace process, though its influence has fluctuated depending on the administration in power. In recent years, Israel has also made diplomatic inroads with countries in Africa and Asia. In 2020, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made historic visits to several African nations, and Israel has been increasingly involved in humanitarian and development projects on the continent. Israel's soft power, its expertise in areas like agriculture, water management, and cybersecurity, has allowed it to forge new partnerships in previously overlooked regions. Looking ahead, Israel faces both significant challenges and opportunities. The Palestinian issue remains unresolved, and the prospect of a two-state solution seems more distant than ever. But Israel's ability to adapt and innovate has always been its strength. With a rapidly evolving economy, a high level of technological expertise, and a growing international presence, Israel is poised to continue playing a central role on the world stage. However, the path to peace with its neighbors, especially the Palestinians, remains elusive. The question remains, can Israel ever find lasting peace, not just within its borders, but in a region that has been defined by conflict for millennia? One thing is certain, Israel's history is far from over. In fact, it's still being written, and who knows what the next chapter will bring. For a country that has defied the odds time and time again, the future is full of possibilities, but the road ahead will require courage, diplomacy, and, perhaps most importantly, the willingness to dream big.
And so, we've taken a journey through 3,000 years of history, from ancient prophets and kings, through Roman rule, the Crusades, and the birth of the modern state of Israel. We've seen how a tiny, often beleaguered country has defied the odds time and again, emerging as a global player in technology, military power, and diplomacy. But with all that said, what does the future hold for Israel? Will it ever achieve lasting peace, or will it continue to be a flashpoint for conflict in the Middle East? The truth is, Israel's future is as uncertain as it is hopeful. On the one hand, Israel faces significant challenges, particularly with the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The dream of a two-state solution, which once seemed so achievable, is now more distant than ever. The issue of Palestinian refugees, the status of Jerusalem, and Israeli settlements in the West Bank continue to complicate peace talks. And of course, there's the looming threat of violence from groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, not to mention tensions with Iran and other regional actors. But with all that said, Israel has proven time and again that it can adapt and overcome. Its technological sector, once a small blip on the global radar, is now a force to be reckoned with. Israel's thriving startup culture, advancements in cybersecurity, water management, and medical technologies are helping to shape the future not just for Israelis, but for the world at large. Israel is also a leader in innovation when it comes to defense, with systems like the Iron Dome providing crucial protection against rocket attacks. On the diplomatic front, the recent Abraham Accords have marked a significant shift in the region. Israel is slowly but surely gaining recognition from Arab nations, and the once unthinkable prospect of normalization is becoming a reality. But can these agreements last? Will other Arab nations follow suit, or will the Palestinian issue continue to overshadow any potential peace in the region? The reality is that peace, true peace, is complicated. It's never a straight line, but a winding road with stops, detours, and occasional setbacks. But perhaps the biggest lesson from Israel's history is its ability to persevere through adversity. From a small group of exiles seeking a homeland to a thriving modern state, Israel has demonstrated a remarkable capacity for resilience, innovation, and reinvention. In the end, Israel's story is one of contrasts. Triumphs and tragedies, moments of hope and despair, dreams and disappointments. Yet, through it all, it remains a beacon of the human spirit, proof that even in the face of overwhelming odds, nations can rise, adapt, and make their mark on history. As we look to the future, Israel's role in the global landscape will continue to evolve. Whether it's through technological breakthroughs, regional diplomacy, or the ongoing pursuit of peace with its neighbors, one thing is clear. Israel will remain a fascinating, complex, and influential part of the world's story. So, while we've come to the end of this documentary, the story of Israel is far from finished. As the pages turn, it's anyone's guess where the next chapter will take us. But given Israel's incredible history, we can be sure of one thing: whatever happens next will be anything but ordinary.